I thought the camping trip was a bridge, not just a holiday or a break from the noise of the city, but a chance to cross the distance that had grown between us over the years. Distance doesn't appear all at once. It creeps in. Missed dinners, short phone calls, eyes that look past you instead of at you. By the time you notice, it's already built into walls. He stood by the fire, poking at the wood with a stick like he used to when he was a boy. His laughter was easy, even sharp at times, but it never reached his eyes. I wanted to believe we were mending something, a father and son finding common ground again. But there was something hollow behind his smile, something that made the flames in front of us seem warmer than the space between us. I told myself not to overthink it. That's what parents do. We tell ourselves stories, so we don't see the truth. It's good we're here, I said, passing him the mug of coffee I had boiled on the little camp stove. He took it with a nod, but no words followed. He just sipped, eyes drifting to the shadows of the trees, as if something else was waiting there. That silence carried more weight than any sentence he could have spoken. We sat across from each other, the fire crackling, throwing light on his face that now looked sharper than I remembered. He had grown into a man in front of me, and yet I still searched for the boy who once reached for my hand on the same kind of trail. I couldn't find him. "Do you remember when we camped at Redwood?" I asked, trying to stitch the memory into the night. "You must have been 10. We got caught in the rain and your sleeping bag soaked through." He smirked just faintly. "Yeah, you gave me yours." "That's what fathers do," I said, smiling. I wanted him to hear the weight behind those words, but he just poked at the fire again, letting sparks rise without answering. It wasn't anger I felt then. It was something softer and, in a way, heavier. A quiet recognition that love doesn't guarantee closeness. That blood doesn't prevent estrangement. I watched the fire and thought about Sarah, his mother. How many nights she had begged me to be patient with him, to try again when I was tired, to reach even when he pulled away. She had believed love could always find its way back. Sitting there, I wasn't so sure anymore. Still, I tried. I asked him about work, about the apartment he was renting, about the woman I had heard he was seeing. Each answer was short, like a door closed politely but firmly. He wasn't cruel, just distant. And somehow that was worse. At one point, I caught him staring at me, not with warmth but with calculation, as if I were no longer just his father, but something else to measure. It unsettled me. I looked away quickly, telling myself I was imagining it. Later, as the fire burned low, he stretched and said, "We'll head deeper tomorrow. There are trails I want to show you." "Sounds good," I replied, though the words caught in my throat. He smiled, but again it was only with his mouth, not his eyes. When he finally turned in for the night, I stayed awake by the embers. The stars above were sharp and endless, but they offered no comfort. I lay back on my sleeping bag, listening to the sound of his steady breathing from the other tent. That should have reassured me. The sound of my son sleeping nearby, but instead it felt like a reminder of how far he had drifted. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the last time he had come to me without hesitation, the last time he had asked for advice or laughed in a way that wasn't guarded. I couldn't find it. Somewhere between his teenage years and adulthood, I had lost him, or maybe he had let go of me. That night, I lay awake longer than I should have. The forest was quiet, but inside my chest there was noise I couldn't silence. Questions I couldn't answer. Regrets I couldn't undo. I wondered when my son had started looking at me as a stranger. And though I didn't know it then, that thought was the first step into something far darker. Morning came without rest. I had dozed off in fragments, startled awake by the smallest rustle outside, the cold pressing into my bones. When I finally sat up, my back ached and my eyes burned. Across the clearing, his tent was already empty, the zipper left open, sleeping bag shoved aside. I called his name once, but the forest swallowed it whole. Only when I turned toward the river did I see him, crouched by the edge, splashing cold water on his face. He didn't wave. He didn't call out. He just looked at me for a second and then went back to what he was doing. That look stayed with me, detached, almost impatient. We packed up in silence. He carried most of the gear without being asked. His strength casual, practiced. I tried to make small talk, but he answered in short bursts. Yeah, fine. Not really. Words that filled the air but left me outside of it. The trail was narrow, winding deeper into the trees. I followed his lead, and for the first time I realized how easily he could walk ahead and leave me behind. He had grown into a man who didn't need me. I thought that was a natural order of things, children outgrowing their parents. But there was something else in the way he walked, something sharper, almost deliberate. Where are we heading? I asked, stepping over a root. He glanced back, his expression unreadable. You'll see. I didn't like the way he said it. Not curious, not lighthearted. It was flat, final, like the answer wasn't meant to satisfy me, but to remind me not to ask again. We hiked for hours. The sun climbed higher, burning through the canopy. Sweat gathered at the back of my neck, my shirt sticking to my skin. He moved ahead, steady, quick, like he had rehearsed a route. I wanted to stop and rest, but I kept pushing. Pride is a quiet thing, but it's stubborn. By midday, we reached a ridge that opened into a valley. The view should have been beautiful. Rolling trees, the glint of a river cutting to the green. But I couldn't enjoy it. Not when he stood there with his arms crossed, staring out, his face tight with thought. You brought me here for this? I asked, half smiling, trying to break the heaviness between us. He shrugged. Just wanted to see how far you'd go. The words hit harder than I expected. What does that mean? I asked quietly. Nothing. He adjusted the straps on his pack. Let's keep moving. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. To test someone is to doubt them, to measure them. And why would my own son feel the need to do that? We descended into the valley. The trail narrowed again, surrounded by tall grass and the sound of insects. My legs grew heavy. I thought about asking to stop to drink, but the stubborn part of me held back. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Do you ever think about Mom? I asked finally, when the silence became unbearable. His jaw tightened. Sometimes. That's not an easy answer. I said. Sometimes means what? Once a month? Once a year? He stopped walking and turned, his eyes meeting mine. It means sometimes. Isn't that enough? I opened my mouth, then closed it. He was right. He didn't owe me more than that. And yet, it broke something in me to hear how little space she seemed to hold in his life. We kept walking until we reached the clearing. He dropped his pack, sat on a fallen log, and pulled out a bottle of water. He didn't offer me any. I sat across from him, chest rising with uneven breaths. You've changed, I said finally. He smirked, though there was no joy in it. People do. Not always like this. Like what? His tone sharpened. Like you're carrying something I can't see. He didn't answer right away. He just took a long drink, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Cold, but not angry. Detached, but not careless. Maybe that's the point, he said. The conversation ended there. He stood, slung his pack over his shoulder, and motioned for me to follow. I did, though my body was tired, though my chest ached with more than just the climb. That afternoon, as we walked deeper into forest, I realized I wasn't just following his steps. I was following his choices. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if he was leading me somewhere safe, or if I was being led somewhere I didn't belong. The sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. But I couldn't enjoy it. Not when I felt the ground shifting beneath the fragile idea that this trip was meant to heal us. It wasn't a bridge. It was a test. And I was starting to wonder if I was failing it. If you're enjoying the video, hit that subscribe button and drop your country's name in the comments. By the third day, the silence was no longer just a pause between words. It was its own presence, louder than any conversation we might have had. I tried to fill it with questions, small remarks about the trail, the weather, even the sound of birds overhead. But each time, his answers grew shorter, until finally there were none at all. He just kept walking, his back to me, his step steady, unbroken. I told myself maybe he just wanted space. That's what people said when relationships frayed. Give them space. But there's a difference between needing distance and creating it. One is temporary. The other is a choice. We moved deeper into the forest, far from any marked paths. My compass meant nothing now, because I realized I wasn't leading. He was. He knew exactly where he wanted to go, though he never said why. I followed because I had no other choice, because the fear of losing him in those endless trees was stronger than the pride that wanted me to stop. At one point, I stumbled on a root and went down hard on my knee. The pain shot my leg, and I let out a sharp breath. He turned finally, but his eyes didn't soften. He looked down at me like I was a stranger. "You good?" he asked flatly. I forced myself to stand, brushing the dirt from my palms. "Yeah, just slipped." He nodded once and kept moving. No offer of a hand. No pause to see if I could keep up. Just the assumption that I would. Or that it didn't matter if I didn't. That was the moment something cracked inside me. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a hairline fracture that spreads slowly, silently, until the whole surface weakens. I thought of all the nights I carried him to bed, when he was too tired to climb the stairs. All the mornings I made sure he ate before school. The scraped knees I bandaged. The stories I told to chase away his fear of the dark. And now, the same boy, my boy, looked at me as though none of it belonged to him anymore. We reached another clearing by late afternoon. The air was heavy, the kind that pressed down on your lungs. I dropped my pack and sat on a stone, stretching my sore leg. He stayed standing, arms crossed, scanning the trees like he was waiting for something. "What are we doing here?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Why bring me all this way if you won't even talk to me? Finally, he turned. His voice was low but steady. "Because I wanted you to feel it." "Feel what?" "What it's like when someone leaves you behind." The word struck me harder than the fall on my knee. I blinked at him, unsure if I had heard correctly. "What are you talking about?" He looked past me, not meeting my eyes. "All those years you were there, but you weren't. You worked late. You missed games. You let Mom do everything. You think I don't remember?" His voice cracked slightly, but his eyes stayed sharp. "I was trying," I whispered. "Trying isn't the same as being there," he snapped. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Not empty. Full. Full of years neither of us had spoken about. Full of accusations I had never prepared myself to hear. I wanted to defend myself, to tell him about the nights I stayed awake worrying how to keep the bills paid, how to keep food on the table. I wanted to explain that I thought responsibility was the same thing as love. that I believed showing up to work meant I was showing up for him. But looking at him, I realized none of that mattered. What he remembered was absence. What he carried was the weight of it. He sat down finally, but not beside me. Across the clearing, a good distance away, like we weren't even part of the same trip. He pulled out a granola bar, unwrapped it slowly, and took a bite. The sound of the wrapper tearing felt louder than any words we might have said. "Do you hate me for it?" I asked finally. He chewed, swallowed, and stared at the ground. "I don't know," he said, "but I don't forgive you." It was the most honest thing he had said the whole trip, and it left me hollow. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the ground. I watched him sit there, eating in silence, while I tried to swallow the truth I had avoided for years. I thought this trip was about reconnection, but it wasn't. It was about confrontation. And my son wasn't here to find peace. He was here to show me the cost of my absence. That night, as I lay awake again, listening to the forest hum and breathe around us, I didn't wonder about bears or the cold. I wondered about him, about the boy I thought I knew, and the man he had become when I wasn't looking. And for the first time, I realized I was no longer afraid of being alone in the woods. I was afraid of being alone in his life. I woke from a thin sleep with his last words still in my head. "I don't forgive you." They didn't echo, they settled. I lay there staring at the tent ceiling and understood that apology would not save us. Not here, not now. Repair, if it ever came, would be built on something harder than regret. When I unzipped the flap, he was already up. The stove hissed. He measured coffee like a technician, not a son making breakfast with his father. I sat on a flat rock and waited for the right moment to speak. "We should head back toward the main trail today," I said. "We've pushed far enough." He didn't look up. "There's an overlook a couple hours from here." "Worth it." "I'm thinking about daylight. Your mother used to say my sense of timing kept us alive." I tried to smile. "Let me trust it." He tightened the lid on the pot. "Trust me instead." The old habit rose in me, to yield, to hope that yielding would buy closeness. I swallowed it. "I'm not here to win," I said quietly. "I'm here to keep us safe." He killed the stove, handed me a cup, and shouldered his pack. "Then keep up." We broke camp with an efficiency that felt like rehearsal. He moved a step ahead of me, setting a pace that left no room for talk. I waited for a chance to name the heaviness between us, but the trail narrowed and bent, and the chance kept slipping. Midway up the ridge, he stopped and studied the terrain. "Shortcut," he said, pointing to a faint path that cut across the slope. "Saves time. It also loses orientation." I answered, "We don't have markers from that side." He shrugged. "We will once we're on it." We took the cut. The ground shifted under our boots. Gravel rolled. My knee complained, then steadied. He moved with purpose, breathing even, eyes forward. There was no curiosity in him, only intention. When we reached a shoulder of rock, he dropped his pack and exhaled like a decision had landed. "We rest here," he said. "I'll check the line ahead." "I'll come," I offered. "No. 2 minutes." He lifted his canteen, took a long drink, and placed it beside his pack like a marker. "Stay put." He vanished around the outcrop. I waited. 2 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. I stood, scanned the ridge, and saw nothing but light on stone, and a thin thread of trail emptying into distance. His pack was still where he left it. Mine was not. I turned slowly, feeling the hollow open in my chest. My bag, with the navigation tools and the first aid kit, was gone. So were the maps I had folded and refolded the night before until the creases matched the route I trusted. On the rock, His canteen reflected a small circle of sky. Footsteps, then silence. I called his name. No answer. I picked up the canteen. It was barely a third full. For a long minute, I did nothing. Not from shock, from clarity. This was not an accident or misunderstanding. This was a choice. He had walked away from me with what he wanted and left what he calculated I could survive without. It was the cleanest expression of everything he hadn't said. When the minute ended, the part of me that knew how to act took over. I made a list out loud to steady my breath. Water limited, knife pocket, jacket on, matches 2 books, phone low signal, direction backtrack to the last fixed point. I faced the way we had come and began the work of undoing his route. Every few dozen steps, I scored a mark into bark or stone, not for rescue, but to keep my mind from wandering into anger. Anger would not help. Action would. As I walked, I thought about the strange relief inside the hurt. For years I had tried to fix us with money, with plans, with controlled outcomes that looked like love. Standing on that ridge with a light canteen and a pocket knife, I understood that whatever bound us now would not be purchased. It would be proven or it would end. The slope opened onto a narrow shelf I recognized from the ascent. I paused to breathe and to choose. Left felt like pride. Right felt like prudence. I went right. A stretch of loose gravel gave way to firm ground. My legs steadied. The sky shifted toward afternoon, the light flattening into a warning I respected. I set a deadline in my head. If I didn't find a main line by early evening, I would shelter in place and save the last of the water. I said it aloud to make it real. Don't chase. Hold ground. Live to the side. He had wanted me to feel what it was like to be left. I felt it. It was colder than I expected and cleaner too. In the stillness that followed, I realized I was done auditioning for his approval. If he wanted a father who bought forgiveness, that man was gone. An hour later, a worn marker appeared on a tree at shoulder height, a sign from a past hiker that pointed toward a more traveled way. I pressed my palm against it and let the certainty settle. I wasn't lost anymore, not in the way that mattered. I kept moving slower now, saving what I could. Thoughts came and went. Regret, memory, the small, stubborn hope that the boy I raised still existed somewhere under the man who had walked away. I did not fight the hope, but I did not feed it. Near dusk, I reached a junction I remembered from the first day, the place where a wider track crossed the narrow one. I stopped and sat on the ground. My legs trembled. My hands were steady. I took one final drink, sealed the cap, and spoke into the quiet. Enough. Tomorrow I would follow the wider track out. Tomorrow I would make calls. Tomorrow I would be deliberate. Tonight I would keep warm, keep still, and keep my name. I folded my jacket beneath my head and stared at the dimming sky. There was no triumph in surviving to leave behind. There was only knowledge. He had chosen his path. I would choose mine. And when we met again, I would not raise my voice. I would raise the truth. I woke stiff, the night air still clinging to my lungs, but I was alive. The thin blue of dawn stretched across the trees, painting them like a watercolor I had seen too many times before, soft, quiet, yet edged with warning. My body ached, but the ache meant I had endured the night. That mattered more than comfort. I checked what I had left. The near-empty canteen, my pocket knife, the matches. I repeated the list aloud, not out of forgetfulness, but discipline. Out here, discipline was a shield against panic. I had taught him that once, long ago. Maybe he remembered. Maybe that was why he thought I would make it. Or maybe he simply didn't care. I rose, brushed the dirt from my clothes, and faced the wider track. The trail looked endless, stretching like an accusation. Each step was deliberate, my boots landing on earth I once thought would be walked together. He had taken the maps, the compass, the bulk of our supplies, but I carried something heavier, clarity. By mid-morning, I came across a fire ring, blackened with use. Not ours. Others had been here, travelers with their own burdens, their own reasons for cutting through wilderness. I crouched, pressing my hand to the ashes. Cold, days old. Still, it was proof of direction, proof that the path ahead was not abandoned. I followed it, hunger scratching at my gut. Around noon, I saw the faint trace of boot prints in the dirt. His boot prints. I knew the tread, the pattern he had chosen with such precision weeks ago. My heart thudded once, not in fear, but in recognition. He was ahead of me, not far. I slowed. Tracking him became both compass and test. The prince moved steady, without pause, without hesitation. He was not lost. He had known exactly where to go. The question gnawed at me as I walked. Why leave me? Was it punishment? A test? Or something darker? That he no longer believed we belonged in the same story? Late afternoon, I reached a ridge where the view widened. From there I saw smoke, thin and rising, curling into the pale sky. My chest tightened. A campfire. His? Or someone else's? I approached slowly, staying downwind, moving like I had taught him to move when we tracked deer years ago. Each step carried memory. His small hand once fitting into mine, his laughter when the fire crackled too loud, his eyes bright when he caught his first trout. Those images cut deeper than any wilderness could. The smoke led me to a clearing. A tent stood there. His tent. Familiar. The same stakes, the same taut lines, the same small order that told me it was his hand that built it. He was here, but he wasn't. The fire burned low, carefully stacked, not abandoned. His pack leaned against a log, closed but not hidden. On the log, a folded scrap of paper held down by a stone. I hesitated before touching it. My fingers hovered, then closed on the page. It read, "You'll make it out. You always do. Don't follow me. Not this time." No signature. No explanation. Just words sharp enough to cut the air around me. I sat heavily on the log. My throat felt dry, not from thirst, but from knowing. He hadn't left me out of carelessness. He hadn't left me because he thought I couldn't survive. He had left me because he didn't want me with him anymore. The realization didn't shatter me. It steadied me. A clean truth was easier than a false hope. I folded the note and placed it in my jacket pocket, not as proof for anyone else, but as proof for myself. Night would fall again soon. I would make my own camp. I would mark my own trail. I would survive this not because he had faith in me, but because I had faith in myself. As I lit a small fire, the flames danced and spit, carrying sparks into the darkening sky. My heart felt heavy, yet lighter than before. For the first time, I wasn't walking toward him. I was walking toward myself. Tomorrow, the trail would lead me out. But tonight, I whispered into the wilderness. Not a plea, not a curse, but a vow. You left me once. You wanted to find me twice. And with that, I fed the fire, watching it rise, not for warmth alone, but for truth. The trail of truth I now claimed as mine. The morning light broke softer than before, and for once, I didn't wake with the weight of dread pressing on my chest. My body was tired, worn from days of thin meals and restless sleep, but my mind felt sharper. I no longer walked to catch him. I walked to leave the wilderness on my own terms. The trail narrowed through pines, the earth damp beneath my boots. Every sound mattered. The crack of a branch, the stir of a bird, the low whistle of wind. Each one reminded me that I was still here, still present, still alive. And though my son's absence stung, his silence no longer cut the same way. The note had changed everything. By midday I saw it, a wooden sign, weather-worn and splintered, pointing east. The first marker of civilization I had seen since the night he left me behind. My heart didn't race. It steadied. The world was waiting, and I was ready to meet it again. I followed the sign's direction, my pace measured. Hunger gnawed, but clarity pushed me forward. Every step became less about him, more about me. I thought of the years I had given, the weight of trying to mend what perhaps was never meant to heal. Maybe he had carried his resentment too long. Maybe I had carried my guilt just as tightly. The forest thinned, giving way to open ground. And then in the distance I saw the road. A strip of gray cutting to the wild, cars glinting faintly under the sun. My throat caught, not with tears, but with release. I had found my way out. I stopped at the edge of the trees, the shadow of the wilderness falling behind me. I turned once, looking back into the place where I had been tested, where betrayal had forced me to face truths I had avoided for years. It wasn't the wilderness I had survived. It was the silence, the abandonment, the mirror of who I was without him. A voice echoed in my memory, not as but my own, years ago when I had taught him to navigate trails. The map doesn't save you. You do. I smiled at the irony. Perhaps he had remembered more than I thought. I stepped onto the road. Gravel crunched under my boots, sharp and final. Cars passed, strangers with lives untouched by my storm, and for a moment I envied their ignorance. Yet I also felt taller, as if the forest had stripped me of what was weak and left only what was necessary. I didn't know where he had gone. I didn't know if he would come back. But I knew I would not spend my days chasing him. The man who walked out of that wilderness was not the same man who had walked in. When a truck slowed to stop beside me, the driver leaning out to ask if I needed a ride, I nodded once. "Yes," I said, steady and clear. As I climbed into the cab, I kept my eyes forward. The trees disappeared behind me. The road stretched ahead, and with it, a life no longer defined by his choice. The wilderness had not broken me. It had revealed me, and that was enough. That's it for today. Subscribe for more, and drop your country's name in the comments.